My name is Russell Spatz, and I am an alcoholic. I'm from Miami, Florida. I'm in my 44th year of sobriety. I'm old. I'm 75 years old, married for almost 44 years. They told me not to do anything major during my first few months, and I got married after I was 3 months sober. So I think I misunderstood the instructions, didn't think it was a big deal. But I've raised 4 children and sober, and got 8 grandchildren, and self-supporting through my own contributions. And I'm 75 years old, and I'm privileged to be able to do this stuff. I was told many, many years ago by someone that if you don't know what your purpose is in life, by the time you're 25 or 30 years old, you're going to be, to a certain extent, neurotic. And I was one neurotic son of a gun, I can tell you that. I had no idea what my purpose was. I thought my purpose was to make you like me. I thought my purpose was to lord over people. I thought my purpose was to have sex or get involved in romance or gather up cars or money or jobs or prestige. I had so many purposes going on, running around on the planet, most of them fueled by alcohol. You know, I remember you walk into that bar and you're worrying about what other people might think about you, because that's what alcoholics do. They worry about what other people are going to think about them. They're attention junkies, and they're affirmation junkies, and they're pleased. If you're an alcoholic like me, you're a please love me aholic, please don't reject me aholic, and I'm worried about what the group is going to think about me. And I walk into this crowded bar and I have a couple of drinks, and I think I own the frickin' group. I think, it allowed me to go up and ask a gal to dance. You have a couple of drinks, and you walk up to a gal and you want to dance with you? No. I says, you're lost, sweetie. It gave me courage. It gave me everything. And so what's my deal? I'm going to just be honest with you. I guess I'll be honest. I'm thankful that they invited me back. I think I spoke here a couple of times before. It's always amazing to me that people actually invite me back. And I think I was probably truthful last time. So that's really amazing. One of the things that you do as an alcoholic is when you get up to talk, I don't do this now, but early on, is you're always concerned about whether people are going to like you or not. So you run everything through this filter in your mind. Should I say this? Should I say that? There's planning involved, and I can't say this. They won't like me. I can't say that. And then you say whatever you say, and then you worry about what you said and everything. But either fortunately for me or unfortunately for you, that promise in the book where it says we lose fear of people and economic insecurity actually happened to me somewhere around 25 or 30 years or 35 years sobriety. And so I don't have to worry about whether or not you're going to like me. I just worry about whether the Lord likes me. I just get concerned about whether I'm pleasing God or not. Bill Wilson, when he was a few months sober, after he had that white light experience, went to Henrietta Seiberling, and this is all written down in Dr. Bob and Good Old Timers, and he said to her these words. He said, because Bill was like me, he was an alkie from New York and Manhattan and sophisticated situation. And Bill said to Henrietta, he said, Henrietta, I think we shouldn't talk so much about God. And Henrietta Seiberling said this to him. He said, Bill, the only reason you're sober is because of God. So if you don't talk about God and what God has done for you, you might as well be the Rotary Club, because God is your only salvation. So Bill, you got to stop worrying about pleasing alcoholics. Alcoholics have been pleasing themselves all their lives. You better be more concerned about pleasing God. So those sounds, and she says, finally Bill agreed, but Bill was always worried about that stuff for a long period of time. Dr. Bob was a whole different story. You ask Dr. Bob, what is his first things first about? He'd say, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all things will be added unto him. So, but it takes a long time, the drinking. I don't even talk much about the drinking anymore. I mean, I could, you put a gun to my head, I'll do it, but I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, to give a drunk a log. I used to live off of drunk logs, and I could do it and tell some funny stories, and then I drank, but what I prefer to talk about is emotional sobriety. Because whenever I'm talking to a group of people, whether it's at a convention or, a smaller venue or whatever it is, I know without any question, because, when you've been around for 44 years, it's an interesting thing. You get to see things. In the States over here, we have a commercial. It's an insurance commercial. And and one of the things the guy says is, we know a lot because we've seen a lot. I've just seen a lot of stuff. I've seen people drink at 15 years and 10 years and 20 years. I've sponsored people who are 25 years or 30 years sober, and they know loneliness as few do, and they're not happy with their sobriety. So I know it is possible to not drink and be sober for many years and be a mental basket case, and you wouldn't even know it. You might know it if they commit suicide or if they drink again. And many times they do, but sometimes they just live lives of quiet desperation. And I know about that firsthand because that happened to me at 10 years sobriety. It says in the big book, here and there, once in a while, a former drinker who now stops drinking says, feel better, look better, having a better time. But we laugh at such Sally because we know he's going to try the old game again because he's not happy about his sobriety. Soon he'll know loneliness as few do. He'll be at the jumping off place. So I assume whenever I'm talking to a group of people, there's 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 people in there that have 5, 10, 20 years sobriety who are going to be drunk in 6 months, but they don't know it yet. So I really like talking about the emotional part of it, which is what I've been assigned to do these days. I'll sort of breeze through the what it was like deal with just a couple of vignettes. When I was, the big book says drinking's but a symptom of the disease. And I spent 10 years working on that symptom. The symptom, don't drink and go to meetings. Don't drink even if your ass falls off. There ain't no thing so bad that a drink can't make it worse. Picking up medallions for not drinking, talking about not drinking. And that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that. We all come in on that. Here's the truth of the matter, and I'm going to tell you the truth because, sometimes what happens with alcoholics is they sort of like say, well, I can't really say this or I can't really say that, or, I mean, it's such a losing sort of life, worrying about whether or not you're going to get some guy on the first row of an A meeting doesn't even pay your visa bill, upset because of something you said. So what I basically do is I basically talk about the truth and whatever the Lord puts on my heart, and let the chips fall where they may. Some people may get upset, but you know what they say: whenever you're disturbed, no matter what the cause, there's something wrong with you. So if it disturbs you, this is my way of giving you what's called a spiritual MRI, and you don't even have to pay me a co-payment. You'll just hate me for about a week or two, say, who invited that son of a bitch to the meeting? How could he say that? You can't do that in AA. You can drive yourself crazy. I'll forget about you in about an hour. And then you can go up to your sponsor and they'll say, put me on some sort of inventory list. Russell, he mentioned Jesus. I don't like that. It hurts my security and blah, 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 blah. And you'll say, well, what did I do wrong? Well, I've been bad-mouthing him for a week. I've been thinking bad thoughts about him for a week. And you'll talk to your sponsor, then you'll pray about it. And then somewhere along the line, I'll meet you 5 years from now. And you'll say to me something like, I used to hate you, but now I love you. And that's the way it works. And if you can do that with everybody in your life that pisses you off, if every person or thing in your life pisses you off, you can, instead of thinking about that, you can put it on a list. You can ask God's help to relieve you of being upset. You can delve into why it upsets you so much, and you can pray about it and make amends if you're having amends. If you can do that with everything in your life that upsets you, then one day you may find that you're living a life where nothing really upsets you too much. I wonder what that feels like. To live a life with no matter how people act, they don't upset you. Because once you get rid of one person who upsets you for whatever reason, then every person on the planet who is like that person doesn't upset you anymore. So what you want to make sure is you get a sponsor that upsets the shit out of you. That's what you want to do. Get one of them sponsors that tells you things you don't want to hear, so you can grow up and be separated out like in the 6th step. That's the only step that separates men from the boys. And you can tell whether you're doing the 6th step because it's the only step that says the people that do it are trying to grow in the image and likeness of their creator. That's what it says. That's the definition according to a well-loved clergyman. You've got to want to grow more than anything else in the image and likeness of your creator, image and likeness of God. And of course, if you don't really have an image or likeness and you don't know what the image of God is, it's going to be hard to grow into it. So that's the deal. I often say to my sponsees, a make-believe God gives you make-believe sobriety, gives you make-believe freedom. It gives you make-believe love. I said, I need something solid. I need something, believe me, with my brain, I don't want to make believe anything. I want to find out what's real and what's true and what works. I not only want the power to stop drinking, I want the power by which I can live an incredible life of joy. I want that rocket ship ride into the 4th dimension of existence. That rocket ship ride they talk about, where you experience much of heaven and no peace. And apparently the only thing I need for that rocket ship ride is I have to get involved in something called the great fact, which is this and nothing less, that God's got to become the central fact of my life. And I think what that means, God becoming the central fact of life, is that's the only thing you think about. God is everything or he's nothing. It's not God and it's not God and the woman. It's not God and the money. It's not God and what they think about you. It's not God in your car. It's not God in your weight or what the scale says. It's not God and anything else. It's just God because the central fact in your life. And the problem with that as an alcoholic, apparently, and I'm like Bill Wilson, that even if you get to the point where you surrender yourself to God and you do what they did in 1935, from 1935 to 1937, you do the surrender and you get on your knees before you go to an AA meeting, even if you do that, just like Bill Wilson, in other words, you want God and he came and the white light experience happens, apparently, according to Bill Wilson, and according to me, because I've had this experience, worldly clamors, the clamors of this world, the women, the men, the money, can blot out the sunshine of his presence. So you can actually want God and have him come to you and stop drinking. And then all of a sudden the men, women, circumstances, money, government can just blot him right out. And then all of a sudden now you're doing half measures, half measures which avail us nothing. That part of the thing that's what it says. Unless you get rid of your old ideas, the result is nil. Unless you let go absolutely. There is one who has all power. That's God. May you find him now. And I got to tell you some unfortunate, I don't know whether it's unfortunate news, but it's sort of true. Sometimes finding God now, sometimes making God the central fact of your life, so important to you that you'll even talk about him at an AA meeting because your relationship to him is more important than what other people think about you. Sometimes getting to that point can take 20 or 30 years. Sometimes it doesn't have to happen after the first month or two. So here's a couple of vignettes. So when I was, let me see, how old was I? I don't know. I came to AA when I was 31. When I was, 25 years old, I got married and I had a child. I was going to become, before I got married, I decided I was going to become an astrophysicist or a mathematician, and I took all the courses in undergraduate school, got straight A's. I became a National Science Foundation fellow. I graduated with departmental honors in mathematics. And that's all I wanted to be, a mathematician or an astrophysicist. Took all the courses in physics and chemistry and all that stuff. And I was in a logic class one day, and into the logic class, this woman walked in with legs up to here. She was a cheerleader. And I looked at her and I said this to myself: if I only had that woman, I'd be okay. You know, that's the way I think. I wake up every morning and say, if I only had that new car, I'd be okay. If I only had more money, I'd be okay. If I could only lose 20 pounds, I'd be okay. You know, if I could only get a haircut, I'd be okay. I was constantly telling myself, if I only had something, I'd be okay. You know, and believe me, if I could buy it, I'd go out there and buy it to be okay in an instant. So let me tell you something. I spent money I didn't have to buy crap I didn't need to impress people I didn't like to possibly imagine. I maxed out more credit cards trying to be okay. You know, I never realized that whenever I said to myself, I only had this, I'd be okay, I was only telling myself that I'm not okay. Alcoholics like doing that. They don't even like doing that. They're compelled to do that. If you're an alcoholic like me, you drive around in your car sometimes, or you're lathering up in the shower sometimes, and all of a sudden you hear that voice. You guys ever hear the voice? The voice that tells you, all of a sudden you hear this voice, and it says this: you're such a piece of crap. You're a loser. You're never going to be okay. Who are you kidding? You're such a fucking phony. There's something wrong with you. I look around the shower to see who's saying that crap to me. And I'm the only one in the shower, you know, and the bottom line is what I ultimately realized is that voice is coming from deep down inside of me. That's my reputation with me. And that's why I'm constantly thinking that I got to somehow prove myself or hide or not let you know what I'm really like. And that's why I walk around that feeling of being restless, irritable, discontented. You know what fixes that? I'm an alcoholic because no woman, no car, no amount of money, no nothing ever worked for me. Never worked for me so well and so fast as just a few drinks. That's all I need, just a few drinks. And so I drank it, and that's the deal. And when I was as I said, I was going to school to become a mathematician. I had applied for my PhD. I was going for a PhD in algebra, something called algebraic topology. That's what I was going to specialize in. And I met this gal, and she had her legs up to here, and she was beautiful. And I said, if I only had her, I'd be okay. And so believe me, I wanted what she had, and I was willing to go to any length to get it. And I started a course, as most alcoholics do, to win her and insinuate myself into her life. And I met her father. Her father was a doctor. I met her mother. Her mother was a lawyer. I met her grandfather. Her grandfather was a lawyer. I said, man, this is a bunch of professionals. And all of a sudden, I woke up one morning. I decided, you know something? I shouldn't be a mathematician. I should not be an astrophysicist. I should be a professional. That's what I should be. They earn more money. They're more respected. And I went down to the medical school, and they said, man, you got great grades. We'd love to take you, but you have no biology. You just have to go back to school for a year and take biology and anatomy. And I'm an alcoholic. I ain't going back anywhere. There ain't no way I'm going backwards. I want what I want when I want it immediately. So I marched right over to the law school. You know, that's what I did. I marched right over to law school, and they looked at my grades, and they said, you have $300? I said, yeah. I gave it to them. They said, you're in. And I got into law school. I think I took the LSAT. I got into law school, and that's why people ask me, and of course I got into law school, and I was going to law school, and I met this girl, and her mother's a lawyer, her grandfather's a doctor. I fit right in there, and I married that young lady. So somebody asked me, and I believe this. They asked me, why did you become a lawyer, Russell? And I said, well, I like Perry Mason, and I like the law. But the truth, you want to know the truth? I became a lawyer and switched everything in my life around to get into some gal's pants. And I'm sorry if that offends you. If that offends you, you're probably the kind of alcoholic that never hoards yourself out for the world. But I'm basically a world whore. I will do anything and become everything and say anything to get what I want. I have no principles whatsoever. I am, even now, I used to say this early on. I used to say I'm spiritual. I'm spiritual, not religious. You know something? I'm not spiritual. I've never been spiritual. I don't know. I don't even understand how a person like me can declare himself righteous. I'm a good person. Anything you ever see in me, anything you see in me that gives you any idea that I know anything about anything having to do with spiritual or loving people or being kind to people or not thinking about myself only has nothing to do with me, because I've lived myself too long with myself to know exactly who I am without God. I know exactly who I am, the evil kind of crap I do, and the things I can become in a nanosecond if I'm not making God the central fact in my life. So I'm not a spiritual guy. I'm a material man. I'm a material girl. I'm Madonna. I'm the male Madonna. I'm a material man in a material world, and I will, if you hit my hand with a ball peen hammer, I'll hurt, and I'm easily swayed, and the saving grace I have is the same thing I have with alcohol. There will come a time in every man's life, every person's life, every alcoholic's life, well, he'll have no defense against the first drink. He'll have no defense against the first lie. He'll have no defense against the first hurting somebody or saying something bad. He'll have no defense. His defense can only come from his relationship with God. In my case, my relationship with the Lord. So I married that gal. Of course, I'm still drinking. I had a baby. I went to work for the state's attorney's office. I became a division chief prosecuting major crimes in Miami-Dade, Florida, murders and things like that. And had a beautiful house on Miami Beach on the golf course, and this beautiful wife and this beautiful child. And I don't know, one day I just found myself after hours hanging around with the homicide cops in the what do you call it, in the bar. It was called the Alibi Lounge. And, I see some people that come into AA and they say things like, I have to find balance. I can't make AA. I need balance in my life. So let me tell you what balance is to me. I would walk into the bar at 4:30 in the afternoon, hang out with the homicide cops while I had a wife and a baby at home, and I'd stay there until 4:30 in the morning. I thought nothing about drinking 12 hours in a bar with a wife and a kid at home. And then I'd come home drunk, and I'd come home, and that was the deal. And that's what balance is for me, I mean, that was my deal. My wife sort of put up with that for about 5 years. And then one Friday, I was dressed in my blue suit and my white shirt and my red tie on my way to the office. It was 7 a.m. And she came up to me and she said, Russell, I just want you to know, if you come home drunk one more time, I'm leaving you. 12 words, pretty simple. If you come home drunk one more time, I'm leaving you. And she didn't want to start an argument. She was just like delivering the mail. And I heard that, and I got in my car, and I was as sober physically as I am right now, but not so much sober intellectually, inspirationally, with that alcoholic brain. And I drove my car for about 3 blocks and stopped at a light, and I said this to myself: what the hell did she mean by that? When somebody tells you, if you come home drunk one more time, I'm leaving you. And what I learned is that unless and until an alcoholic accepts his alcoholism and all its consequences, his sobriety will be precarious, and if true happiness will find none at all. And I had consequences to being an alcoholic. And my consequences are, one of my consequences, there are many consequences, is whenever somebody says something or tells me something or I read something that I don't like, it confuses me. And so my wife said as simply as possible, you come home drunk one more time, I'm leaving you. I'm sitting there saying, what the hell did she mean by that? Because it didn't make any sense to me. So at 4:30 at night that same day, I went up to my bar at 4:30. I always got to my bar half an hour early. I started feeling relief as soon as I pulled up. I sat down in my chair. I ordered my usual drink, a double scotch neat, So I could whack that down because believe me, I was in a hurry to be rocking in the fourth dimension. I'm not giving a crap. And my good friend Doug Hartman came up. I hadn't forgotten what my wife said. My good friend Doug Hartman came up. And I said to him, Doug, I got to leave. And he says, what do you mean you got to leave? He says, Ronnie said to me, if I come home drunk one more time, she's leaving me. She's leaving me, and I've got to leave. And Doug looks at me. He's one of my drinking buddies, and he puts his arm around me. And he says, Russ, you're the greatest guy in the world. I love you, buddy. Everybody loves you. You're the greatest guy in the world. Your wife adores you. Your wife loves you. She's never going to leave you. And all of a sudden I say to myself, hell, that's just what I've been thinking. I love drinking buddies. And so it seemed like a good idea to have another drink and then another drink. And next thing that I know, I'm home at 4:30 in the morning. And next thing that happened is I'm out of the house and I'm kicked out. And that was the end of a 5-year marriage. I lost my house. I lost my son. I lost my wife. I lost everything. And I wasn't even upset about it because I had been sitting in that bar for hours, for days, for years. I never physically cheated on my wife. I would just sit there for 10 hours looking at the blondes, brunettes, and redheads and saying, man, if I only wasn't married, I could have that one. If I only wasn't married, I could have this one. If I only wasn't married, I could get that one. I never cheated on my wife. All I did was leave her at home alone and saying, if I only had this, if I only had that, I'd be able to get that deal. And that was, of course, cheating on my wife, cheating her out of having a husband. And I don't remember one guy coming up to me in that bar saying, Russ, you're 26 years old, 27 years old. You got a wife. You got a child at home. Why don't you grow the hell up? What the hell are you doing here? Why don't you get out of here and go home and be a father and be a husband and be a man and do the... I don't remember anybody saying that. They would say things like, I'm buying. I'll buy this round and I'll buy that round. And so I got divorced and my plan was to become the Hugh Hefner of Miami in any event. And then I got divorced, and all of a sudden on December 25th, Christmas morning at 3 o'clock in the morning, I found myself kicked out of a party. A gal invited me to a Christmas Eve party. Her father kicked me out because I was drunk, because I was always drunk. I got drunk before I got to the party, and here I was. It was Christmas, 1980, 3 o'clock in the morning, all alone, and of course, I'm also a self-pity-aholic. I used to sit by the phonograph and think about myself, think about all those girls that hurt me and ripped my heart out. I think about my funeral. I play the Alki songs. I love Alki songs like Only the Lonely, I'm Mr. Blue, Rainy Days and Mondays, all that good shit. Believe me, I don't need Alki songs to make me feel sorry for myself. Anything could make me feel sorry for myself, you know, and the bottom line is so it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and I knew I was 31 years old. I knew my life was over, and it was never going to get better again. And that was the end of my life on the planet. And I turned on the TV, and there was some preacher preaching at 3 o'clock in the morning, and he basically gave his testimony about the gospel. And he said, look, if you want to change your life, you know, if you want to change your life, you accept Jesus into your life. It says your whole life will change and he'll help you out. And I want to tell you something, like a shot, I got on my knees and I said the sinner's prayer, and I think I was sincere as a heart attack. And I believe actually something happened, and I asked Jesus to come into my life. And it may not be a big deal to you, but for a Jewish kid from Great Neck, New York, it was a really big deal. My sponsor used to say to me, it was very simple. He said, you know, Russell, never rob an alcoholic of his desperation. Every alcoholic has to have his last drink. And if you don't understand what I did before the big book, before anything, getting down on my knees and doing that, if you don't understand that, I guess you just never been to that place. I guess you just have to be there. You know what I mean? I guess you just have to be there. And that's where I was. And I did that deal. But I continued to drink for 30 days. And that doesn't mean I think nothing happened. I think something happened. Sometimes the Lord enters your life and starts rearranging the furniture, and he doesn't even ask your permission. And 30 days later to the button, I had my last drink while lying in the hospital after getting into an accident and almost killing myself and somebody else. And I had my last drink. And a few days later, I went to Alcoholics Anonymous and I picked up a white chip. I'm going to skip a little bit forward. I got myself a sponsor, and I was willing and I was ready, and I became stark raving sober. I was intergroup banquet chairman for the first 2 years in a row at Miami-Dade County. I was in charge of relay, and if you called up for 8 years in Miami, if you ever called on a Friday and Friday nights and Saturday morning to speak to somebody in Alcoholics Anonymous, you got me. I sponsored anything that moved. I did all the steps. I went to all the conventions. I did all the speaking around. I did step series. I did everything by the book. Bill Wilson was, I wanted what Bill Wilson had. AA was the central fact of my life. I wasn't an atheist. I would tell you I believed in God. I said the Serenity Prayer. I held hands and said the Lord's Prayer. I didn't buck that system. But there's only one problem I have, and it's not, I don't blame myself. It's a problem that I had the Bill Wilson problem. Worldly clamors. You see, God wasn't really the number one thing about life. The number one thing is looking for validity in the eyes of a woman. The number one thing was having money. The number one thing was having a car. The number one thing was having a job. The number one thing is worrying about what you think about me. I had so many things that was crowding out God. God was like number 20th on the list unless something really went wrong. And then all of a sudden I'd move him up, or I'd take him out of the glove compartment. Of course, every time I went to an A meeting, I'd take him out of the trunk. He was right next to the tire, the spare tire, and I'd take him up to my A meeting. But I certainly wasn't going to talk about him. There's this great line in the gospel that says, where the Lord says, if you're ashamed of me before people, I'll be ashamed of you before God. And I can tell you something, I was ashamed of God. I was in AA? I was a spiritual agnostic. I was a liar. I was what they talk about in the 7-step. I was the guy where I said I believed in God, and I had earnest belief, but my faith was barren and didn't give me anything. You know why? Because I was ashamed of God. I was ashamed of talking about God. See, I wanted to be cool. I wanted you to reject me. Well, I'm not reject me, to accept me. The last thing I wanted was somebody to look funny at me because I was one of those freaks or something that believe in God. That stupid stuff. Because the one thing I prided myself in is I always prided myself in the fact that I was the smartest guy in the room. And I knew that people thought that people believed in God were stupid. So I never paid attention to when I read this stuff in the big book. Even though Bill Wilson in Alcoholics number 3 said, the Lord has been so wonderful to me, curing me of this terrible disease that I can keep talking about him and telling other people and gave all credit to God. Even though the big book said, it says, we never... Let me turn off my phone. I'm sorry, folks. You gotta turn off my phone. Oh, well, forget it. It ain't, we never apologize for God. The truth of the matter is, I was scared that you might find out that I actually believed in God. He wasn't the most important thing in my life. Sponsee trying to call me. Sorry about that. Let's hope he doesn't drink. And then I read all this stuff in the big book. The last page, our real reliance has to be on God. He will show you how to create the fellowship we prayed and all that sort of stuff. But the bottom line is, how do you decline this thing? I hope you guys can't hear that ringing. But the bottom line is, my life was not a life where God was the central fact of my life. My job was the central fact of my life. What you thought about me was the central fact of my life. Money was the central fact of my life. What I looked like on the outside, all the vanity stuff was the central fact of my life. I had a lot of things that crowded God out of my life. And you know what Bill Wilson says? Worldly clamors. mostly within myself, blocked out his presence. And so I found myself, I got remarried to a wonderful gal. We had a bunch of kids, and I found myself a 10-year sobriety, and I decided to get a divorce because we had an argument, and she said something to me, and she disrespected me, and I was 10 years sober, and I was doing everything in AA. And I walked up to my sponsor, Joe Snyder, and I said, Joe, I said, I got to divorce my wife. And he said, and I said, let me tell you what she did. And I spent about 20 minutes telling him in detail what she had done to me. She said this, and I said that, and she said this. And I said, I didn't sign up for this crap. I'm getting out of here. I can't handle this kind of stuff. And he said to me this. These are the words he said to me. He said, well, why are you upset? And I said, what are you talking about, Joe? Why am I upset? He says, why are you upset? I said, Joe, I just spent 20 minutes, a half an hour, telling you in detail what she said to me. I told you in detail what she did to me. I told you in detail exactly what happened. That's why I'm upset. And he looked at me and said, Russell, that's not why you're upset. I said, what do you mean that's not why I'm upset? He says, that's not why you're upset. I said, you mean when he says, Russell, that's not why you're upset. I said, what about when he says, Russell, that's not why you're upset. I said, well, what? He says, Russell, that's not why you're upset. And then I sort of shut up for a second. And then I said, well, what? He says, Russell, that's not why you're upset. And then he just looked at me and I looked at him. And, somehow in my mind, I had a feeling that he knew why I was upset. And, being incredibly interested in knowing myself and why I might have been upset, I looked at him and I said, do you know why I'm upset? And he says, absolutely. I said, do you know why I'm upset? He says, absolutely. It's easy. I know exactly why you're upset. I said, you know exactly why I'm upset? He says, absolutely. And then he shut up. And I looked at him and I said, well, are you going to tell me why I'm upset? And he said, do you really want to know? I said, well, of course I want to know. Why am I upset? And now I'm begging him to tell me. He says, why am I upset? And he says, and this is exactly what he said to me, because my sponsors always respected me. He looked at me and he said, listen, stupid, you're upset because you're upsettable. I said, what is this, Zen AA? He says, I'm just telling you, you're upset because you're upsettable. That's why you're upset. And now we're talking emotional sobriety. One time a guy bounced a $50 check on me, and he bounced a $50 check on me, and it caused me to bounce checks. And I was talking about that guy and hating that guy for a week, and I put him on the list and everything like that, but I couldn't stop thinking about that check. And finally, my sponsor came up to me and he says, well, you're talking about this guy and he bounced a check on you. He says, yeah, he bounced a $50 check. And he says, well, what if why do you keep on talking? What is it? He says, the guy bounced the check on me. I had to bounce checks, had to close my account and everything like that. He said, Russell, what if it didn't bother you? And I looked at him and I said, I don't understand the question. I said, well, what if it didn't bother you? I said, Bob, I swear to God, I don't understand the question. He said, it's very simple. What if it didn't bother you? I said, I don't understand the question. He says, listen, the question is very simple, Russ. The guy bounced a $50 check on you, right? Yeah. You're upset, right? Yeah. He says, what if it didn't bother you? I said, I swear to God, Bob, I don't understand. What do you mean, what if it didn't bother you? Because I would always say, well, if it happened to you, you feel the same. What do you mean, what if it didn't bother you? And he said, it's a very simple question. What if it didn't bother you? In other words, you're asking me, what if it didn't bother me that he bounced a $50 check on me? Is that the question? He says, yes. What if it didn't bother you that he bounced a $50 check on you? And then I sat there and I said, well, if it didn't bother me, I'd be okay. And he said, there you go, and walked away.
5 minutes, Russell.
So the bottom is, and then he said, there you go. And he walked away. And that's the exact same thing that my my third sponsor, my second sponsor, Joe Snyder, said to me later on when he says, your problem is not what happened, it's that you're upsettable and things upset you. Until you get to the point where you don't get upset over it, you're always going to have a problem. So I'm going to tell you one more story about emotional sobriety. One more story. This happened 7 months ago. You know, they say the 10th step is about restraining tongue and pen. And all I can tell you is I'm not totally perfect on this, but I don't worry about what people think about me most of the time. And I don't spend a lot of time worrying about the bank account or money or stuff like that. I just rely on God. And the only reason that happened is because of 10 years sobriety. When I was going down the tubes, I walked up to some guy and made the mistake of walking up to him, and told him all my story. He says, you need to start going to Bible study. And I explained to him that he didn't understand. I go to AA and I'm spiritual, not religious. And he says, that's what you need to do. He said, you need to develop a belief serious belief in God and make him the central factor of your life. And that's what I've been doing for 33 years. And I think I ought to throw that in there. It doesn't mean you have to do that, but it worked for me. And the bottom line is this. So the other day, about 6 months ago, my last story, which has something to do with emotional sobriety, is I walked out of my bedroom one morning, and my lovely wife was there. My wife of 43, almost 44 years was there. And she was bringing out from the outside this huge package. And this huge package said industrial strength, I don't know, it was like a vacuum cleaner or something like that. It was something that takes off steam cleaner, industrial strength steam cleaner. And I looked at it and I could tell right away it was a $500. I mean, it was like Price is Right. I looked at this thing, that's $500. She got it from Amazon. They delivered it. And so I'm already starting today $500 in the hole. Now listen, money isn't everything, but it's like right up there with oxygen. You know what I mean? And so there it is. I'm already $500 in the hole. And I say to her, oh, you bought a steam cleaner? She says, yes, I did. And then she walks outside and she brings in another package, same exact package. And it's a steam cleaner. And I say, oh, you bought another steam cleaner? He says, yes, I did. So now I'm $1,000 in the hole. And I didn't even think we needed a steam cleaner. So I say to my wife simply this. I ask her this question, a normal question. I say, why did you buy two? And she says, because I wanted two. And I'm about to ask the next question, which I said, which I'm pretty sure had the F word in it. I'm pretty sure it had the F word in it, you know? I remember it now, and it was coming in my brain. I was about to ask the next question, and all of a sudden I heard this voice. The voice, the still small voice of the Lord, and it said this to me. It said, Russell, you have just gotten the best answer you're ever going to get from this woman. That's the best answer you're ever going to get. And so I smiled and I walked away and I forgot about the whole thing. I just forgot about it. I just went away and walked away. And it didn't upset me. It upset me for a nanosecond and I walked away. 3 days later, now for the rest of the story, 3 days later, I'm having my workshop. Every Saturday I have a 3-hour workshop with sponsees and stuff. And I have a couple of my sponsees there. I think Sheldon was there. And I have a couple of my sponsees there. It's on Zoom and everything. We're setting up. And my wife is outside with the steam cleaner. And I walk outside there. She is sitting there with the steam cleaner. And I say, what's going on? She says, the steam cleaner's not working. So I say, well, sweetheart, why don't you just get the other steam cleaner? And she says to me, I knew you couldn't let it go. I knew you couldn't let it go. You couldn't let it go, could you? Well, I got that steam cleaner for your information from my cousin. That's why I got it. And you couldn't let it go. I started laughing. I was just so happy that I had witnesses. You know, and now it's funny. And now all it is, it's just a story I tell in AA about, I think it's about emotional sobriety. What do you think? I don't know. just a fun. But you know, she had been carrying that hand grenade in her pocket. She had been. That's my wife asking me, why am I screaming like a maniac? Because of your story that I'm telling them. And so that's the way it is for me right now. I don't have too many things that upset me. And it's only because that I can only tell you this. The more I put God into my life and the more he becomes the central fact of my life, the more I become undisturbable. The more I focus on him, and that means talking about him, that means building a fellowship around me where they talk about him. The more that happens to me, the less I pay attention to 95% of the stuff that goes around me. That and the fact, of course, that I have dementia also helps. Well, I think it's the reason I think it's dementia is I told my wife, I said, I think I'm finally emotionally sober. She says, no, that's just dementia. Either way, it works. So thank you very much. That's all I have to say.